What's going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the MCU Reviewed. This is episode 4. And today on the docket, we've got, Thor. So, another origin story here. We're excited to talk through some of our likes, some of our dislikes, some Easter eggs, you name it. We're going to get to a nice discussion today. As always, the MCU Reviewed is presented by our friends over at Fantastic, who we'll talk about in just a moment. But with me, as always, Mr. John Fick. John, how are you today, my friend?
I am well. Excited to talk some Thor, my friend.
Me too. Rashawn, how you doing today?
I'm great. We're talking some God of Thunder, so we got some Loki, we got some Odin, we're getting into the goodness here. I mean, we've been in the goodness, but I mean, we're going head first. We just keep going down.
Well said. And our good friend Del Reid. Del, we just had a fun time on a different podcast of sorts.
We did. We had a good time talking with Sal Capaccio of WGR about Star Wars. Hence why I'm not wearing a Marvel themed shirt. My bad. Sorry. I just didn't want to
us.
anything too
okay.
lazy. All right. Yeah. Good looking out. But yeah, excited to be here. Thank you again for having me. I love doing this with you guys.
Well, we love having you. It's always a good discussion. I think this is one of our favorite projects here at the Geekiverse. In case you didn't know, we are going through week by week, one movie a week on the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's going to take us almost all the way to Black Widow's new release date, so that's kind of exciting. Hopefully you're watching along with us here. Let's talk about Thor in general here. Just kind of first impressions in a nutshell. Why don't we start with John?
Yeah, man. So I think this is only the second or third time I've seen this movie. The first time I watched it was during my rewatch last year in the lead up to Avengers Endgame, and I liked it. It was okay. I just, for whatever reason, didn't really care to see the Thor movies when they came out, and nothing really compelled me to see the first two at least. I will say watching it again last night was the most fun I've had with this movie so far. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that Thor's arc has come full circle, and we've seen Thor in Ragnarok, we've seen Thor in Infinity War and Endgame. So just to kind of appreciate that character was something that it was a lot different watching it this time. And again, when I watched it last year, I'd already seen Ragnarok and I'd seen Infinity War, so I'd had a lot of that basis. But something about just the kind of the end of the MCU, the Infinity Saga, it just helped a lot. Yeah, it was a fun movie. I mean, it's not blown me away in terms of a completely well made film. There's a lot of, I would say, kind of boring characters. There's a lot of lulls in the movie, but I had a lot of fun with it.
Rashawn, tell us your thoughts on this movie.
Yeah, so if I transport myself back in time, and you're watching the end of Iron Man 2 and you see that post-credit scene with Thor's hammer, right? So at that point, we've gotten Iron Man, we've gotten Hulk, and again, even if you look at past Marvel, we got Spider-Man, we got all these kind of different comic book movies, whether they were good or bad. But with Thor, man, you're like, how the heck are you going to do a Thor movie without making it like cheesy as all heck, like without just going like super crazy with it for the worst. But my first impressions, they did a great job for an origin story with this. They didn't go too over the top, but again, they didn't really have to. They told the story that they were looking to tell for a good origin story, obviously to set up where they were going next. And they made a Thor in the modern day at that time. I believe we're talking 2011, that didn't feel corny, that didn't feel cheesy. And for Thor's first live action appearance, they did a solid job.
Thank you again. If you're just tuning in, whether that's on podcast form or at youtube.com/thegeekiverse, we are on episode 4 here of the MCU Reviewed. Del, dive into your thoughts a little bit on Thor.
Yeah, this is only the second or third time I've seen this movie, and it's the first time I've seen it since Ragnarok. So last time I saw this movie, I hadn't even seen, the best Thor movie, one of the best MCU movies to date. In mine and probably everybody else's opinion in the world, but I really enjoyed it. One thing that really struck me, and I should have remembered this, having seen Ragnarok so many times, but for some reason, this time it really hit me, like how beautiful, a lot of the scenery is with Asgard and just the cosmos. It's really pretty. And I think that that doesn't get talked about enough in a lot of these rewatch, podcasts I listen to and everything. And there's a lot of like early seeds in terms of the humor that Chris Hemsworth can bring to the character. Basically, it opens up. Not to get too far into the movie already, but it opens up basically as Lord of the Rings, and so they do a really good job of backing off of that a little bit and working a little bit of the humor in while still staying true to that kind of feel that they start off with.
I think that's a good take, Del. I was thinking the same thing last night. Like, this is, the first fantasy movie in the MCU early on here. It's got those Lord of the Rings vibes to an extent. And I do share your view on that universe, in particular, looking at all the different realms, the different cinematography throughout. It's different than anything that obviously we had seen to date, and to an extent after that. Thor. So for me, I've watched this movie so many times. I don't know if I could put a number on it. It was one that I always kind of dreaded getting to. I was like, okay, whatever. And I even found it, dare I say, boring. The first few times I did watch it through. Seeing where Thor has come has drastically changed my opinion on this movie. I wouldn't say that I put this in the top half of my rankings, for example, when all is said and done. But goodness gracious, like, it was always Cap and Tony Stark for me. Those were always the two guys, even though Thor was kind of the third part of that triumvirate. But as we got to Ragnarok, and then on top of that, Infinity War, and even to a degree, Endgame, like, I love going back and watching this, because as different and as much as we've seen this character grow, and arguably has gone through the most hell of anyone in the MCU, he's at its heart a very similar character to the one that we see in Ragnarok, that goofy kind of Thor, even though that's not where I believe they were going with it at first. So it's almost like he came full circle. Anyway, I think it's one of the it's hard to rank where it is in terms of origin stories. So we'll find that out in the weeks to come here. But I think it's one of my more favorable ones. So this came out. John, we're going to get into box office numbers here. I want to say May 2011.
Yes, yeah, May 2011 sounds right. I don't have that release date, but I have box office numbers. One thing I wanted to jump off with, just first impressions, just kind of jump off something Del said, with the visual art style and how a lot of the scenes were like breathtaking for you. One thing that really stood out to me, especially watching last night, this was the first time in the MCU that the music has stood out to me. I thought that in Iron Man 2, in Incredible Hulk so far, the music was just kind of very baseline, like, okay, this is superhero music, with the exception of Iron Man, because it was a lot of like licensed rock music, so it was a little bit different. But in terms of original music, this was the first time that I'm like, oh, we're in Asgard, and I can just tell with my eyes closed. This music is incredible. Yeah,
John, great point. I feel like I'm always listening to musical cues and just the general score of a movie, but I did notice that as well last night watching this. You hear a lot of strings, cellos, violins, and that almost kind of plants the seeds towards the eventual Avengers theme that we get, right? You guys all know it. You've heard it a million times. That's it feels like the groundwork was laid here with this movie.
For sure.
Good call on that.
Yeah, with the music, I think, because Kenneth Branagh is the director, if I remember correctly, he brought in a composer that he had worked with on several of his Shakespeare movies. And so I think that's why it has a little bit of a different tone. I'm looking up the guy's name now. Patrick Doyle is the name of the composer, and it looks like he had worked with Branagh quite a bit in the past.
Cool, makes sense.
Yeah, they definitely work well together. There's no doubt about that when seeing this movie.
Another thing for me, real quick too. Again, I have a different lens, just, putting myself back when the movie came out. For me, at least, from not, and you could say this about a lot of the MCU characters they chose to build around, of course, the Iron Mans, the Captain Americas, etc. But really for Thor, I mean, before this, there were two characters that I hated in the MCU as we have today. I only give away one for now, and one of them is Thor. And like, whether it was video games, like way back when, like the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games, whatever it was, TV shows, comics, whatever, I wanted to avoid anything Thor. just because I just associate it with him being cheesy. And I'm like, okay, he's a god, but Spider-Man, Hulk, and Wolverine, But for me, the direction they took with this Thor, man, this made Thor cool for me. Chris Hemsworth's take, Kenneth Branagh's take, Kevin Feige's take, all the cooks in the kitchen there. This made that character and the rest of the characters in that Thor universe cool for me. So I really brought him to life in a way to where, of course, again, growing up, you want to be Spider-Man, right? Or, depending on the kid, maybe you want to transform into a big green monster like the Hulk. There was a brief stint in my childhood where I wanted to swing a hammer and be the God of Thunder. There was a very brief time. I want to be somebody else now, which we'll get to in future episodes. And in terms of how many times I've seen this in theaters, I mean, not in theaters. I saw it in theaters. I'm sorry. But in terms of how many times I've seen it, this is probably the one MCU where I can't tell you how many times I've seen it. There was a period where I used to come home from school every day and put Thor on. What reasons why? I don't know. You'd have to ask little me. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily is going to reflect on my ranking per se, because I don't even know if I have this on my top 10 today, or maybe, probably not even on my top 10.
Hey, don't give it away. Don't give it away.
We'll see. We'll see.
And hey, your top 10 doesn't mean it will be in the top 10.
Exactly. Right.
True.
Exactly. Yeah.
To those of us who have already been shot down.
Again, if I had the list in front of me, I can map it out, but just off of just initial instinct, it may not be. But I just remember watching this movie all the time. So this was a movie that I watched countless times, and once again, made Thor cool for me. So
gotta love it.
Go ahead, Julia.
Nope, you're good, Del. Go ahead.
I was going to say just real quick, like I hear what you're saying about Thor being like the least interesting character. Like when I was reading comics and everything growing up, I was never interested in Thor, and even when the movie was being released, I'm like, all right, you guys really did sell off all your good properties, didn't you? You're making a Thor movie now? All right, whatever. And who would have thought now, almost 10 years later, that he's the one Avenger that's going to get 4 solo movies? Even Tony only got 3. I mean, maybe 4 if you count Civil War. But it's ironic that he's become like so many people's favorite character now, and maybe that's because he's becoming less and less like the Thor that we always thought of growing up, we always saw. But I just think it's an interesting point, because I always thought he was kind of bland vanilla as well too.
Even from his outfit they made, I like the route that they went where again, I'm not sure the material or whatever, but he just has a full sleeve. It's not necessarily cheesy and cropped off. He doesn't have the traditional helmet. They went away from that and just let his hair go. Just even little design things like that made him feel so much more modern and not ripped out of a comic book. And this is going to be a thing we talk about. We've talked about it already on the show, but moving forward is they've adapted every single character in the MCU perfectly, from their comic book self to what they want in the MCU. Because again, if you take a lot of these characters out of the comic book and try to translate it to a screen, it's going to be a hot mess. And just visually, you're going to be taken out of the movie.
Yeah, I think it's kind of amazing the route Thor has taken throughout the MCU, because I think a lot of us probably would feel the same way, especially as we got to Dark World and even Age of Ultron. Right around there, it was like Thor was there, and that was it. Kind of vanilla, nothing more for me. But things really turned a corner with Ragnarok, which I can't wait till we get to that episode. That's going to be like a 2 or 3 hour episode. We're going to talk about it forever.
It's gonna be
and
great.
I know Del will have to be on that one. What I was going to say was this is the last of the 3 MCU movies that I did not see in theaters. Probably just no interest at the time, because I was not into this idea of a shared universe, and I only kind of sort of cared about Iron Man, and then shortly after Captain America, and then afterwards all of them. So that was my journey with this.
Yeah, this was the one that got me in the theater. Me and my dad finally went. This was the first one, and like same for you. Rest is history.
John, do we want to get into box office numbers?
Yeah, let's do it. I was actually shocked to see that it made $449 million in the box office for a Thor movie. And it wasn't necessarily riding on the coattails of the MCU, because it was really just being established. I don't know if people saw that Thor trailer and at least the casual viewer associated that with those cool Iron Man movies that just came out, Like, I don't think people really made that connection yet. There's been Spider-Man movies, there was a Hulk movie a while ago. We get superhero movies or whatever, but now there's this Thor movie. So I mean, to do 449 million at the box office is pretty huge for a Thor movie before the MCU was really the MCU.
First fantastical movie we got, like fantastical fantasy MCU movie
for sure.
It broadened the universe, right? Like it took us off of Earth. To put that in perspective with how much money this made, Solo: A Star Wars Story did not eclipse 400, I believe. Which, to think about that, with all the marketing power and craze behind Star Wars recently, that a movie like that, which is pretty well received by the fans, that's pretty good for Thor.
Yeah.
All the way back then when it, really, it truly was, especially in the MCU, Thor's first on-screen appearance here. But to think about, my goodness, like, I can't wait for the next Thor movie. That's what I'm thinking about right now in terms of my future MCU movies. Cannot wait. Know very little about it, but I know who's involved, and that's all I need.
Yep.
I'm good to go. And it's amazing how miraculous that turnaround has been, where he's become really one of my favorite characters. And I don't want to, I'll talk about where Thor as a character ranks later on in the weeks here, because it'll make some people mad, but it'll be a worthy discussion, if you will.
Yeah, as far as much progress as Thor's character's made, I don't think this movie's responsible for it, but it definitely happens.
No, no, it's definitely not. But seeing where Thor has gone has made me really like this movie.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I used to think was boring.
And that's something that, like, almost isn't fair to say, because a movie should stand on its own, but this MCU really is so different. Like, they really pulled something special here. I mean, 23 movies that just really work together so well. And a movie from 2011 can be so much more enjoyable because of movies that came out in 2018, 19, 20. Like, insane. It's really, really cool.
I could have talked about that too on Sale's podcast. So Sale had Dell and I on to talk Star Wars and the ranking of the Skywalker saga movies. And one question he posed was great. And it was, when you're ranking these movies, are you thinking about them as a whole or kind of individually? And I said it's almost hard to separate them and look at them just like, I'm just looking at Revenge of the Sith, or I'm just looking at A New Hope. Because as much as I would like, for example, a movie like A New Hope, I loved how Rogue One connected so much with it that it would elevate A New Hope in my Star Wars rankings. Sure. Of course, that's a discussion for another time. But I think I see the same thing over in the MCU, whereas a later entry, like a Ragnarok, has made me at least think twice about where I would rank this otherwise.
Yeah, I think this might be the best example of that in the MCU. I think it's very, very prevalent for sure. And the filter I use when we're doing this podcast is like, I'm trying to watch these movies the night before we record. So how did I feel about this movie last night? And not what's my overall perception and the movie's impact, and I'm not thinking about my first watch. Like, how did I enjoy this movie last night? With everything considered.
The rankings can change, right? Like,
exactly.
It's funny, you would think that it wouldn't. Like, you like these movies in this order. But, and again, we talked about that on Sales podcast. It was how your rankings can change over time and really be affected by later movies, even despite the way you may have originally felt about them.
Yeah, no doubt.
Does everyone want to queue up the original Thor trailer here?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Watch that trailer.
All right.
Cool.
I'll let you steer here, John.
It's not easy to do what you did. You made my men look like a bunch of minimum wage mall cops. That's hurtful. Would you like to tell me where you received your training? Afghanistan? Chechnya? Who are you?
I have sacrificed much to achieve peace. For, through your arrogance and stupidity, you have opened these peaceful realms and innocent lives to the horror and devastation of war. You are a vain, greedy, cruel boy. And you are an old man and a fool! You're unworthy! Father. And now take from you your power. And I cast you out!
Please open your eyes.
Oh no, this is Earth, isn't it?
Where he comes from?
Your ancestors called it magic. And you call it science. I come from a place where they're one and the same.
He has disobeyed his king. His fate is in his own hands now.
I will end this.
All right, gentlemen. So I think the first thing I need to say about that trailer, because I didn't say it in our initial reactions, oh my God, Chris Hemsworth is absolutely cut in this movie. How does a human being look like that? Just come on, dude. It's unfair. When he pops that shirt off and when they're in their office there, I'm like, this dude is perfect. It's insane.
Darcy even mentions that.
Yeah.
For a homeless guy, he's pretty cut.
Oh yeah. It's so good. Now, another first reaction is like, I think this is the 4 for 4 on dialogue that we saw in the trailer that we didn't get in the movie, where he's laying down and says, "This is Earth, isn't it?" That never happened. So early on that MCU, we're seeing a lot of dialogue and stuff cut like that. Pretty cool.
Yeah, two thoughts come to mind immediately. So in a lot of these trailers, especially early in the MCU that we've been rewatching on this show, I've not watched them until this episode. Like, we're actually watching them together. So I've never seen that trailer before. Two things come to mind is Natalie Portman always falls for the bad boy, right? And then if only the world knew the obsession they would have with Loki just about 1 year later.
Yeah.
Just pure obsession. It blows my mind. We were that close because this came out just about a year before Avengers did.
For sure. So. Another thing worth noting is, so I've been compiling all these trailers here. This is the first trailer that I was able to find that was on Marvel's official YouTube channel. So Iron Man 1, 2, and Hulk, for whatever reason, all were just on some like random like screen whatever YouTube channels. I couldn't find it on Marvel official, so this was the first one, officially in the MCU of trailers.
That's kind of amazing. Also, Paramount was involved with this one as well. So we see that in the early MCU that Disney / Marvel was not doing this by themselves because they couldn't.
Yep.
So thoughts on the trailer? Why don't we start with Del first on this one?
Chris, fix your eyebrows, man. That's through the whole movie, but the trailer just reminds me, like, this whole movie, his eyebrows are just like, why'd they dye him so light? But no,
it's not where I'm looking.
No, it was a fine trailer. I'd never seen it before. It really just pretty much recounts the movie. Like, this is what's going to happen. This is what you're going to see. He's gonna get cast out. He's gonna go to Earth. And he's gonna fight some bad guys eventually. And nowadays, I think it's been mentioned on this podcast before how now the trailers, they don't have to show us anything. They're just like, here's Black Widow, here's Red Guardian. Look, they're going to be together at some point and talk about things. And don't you want to see this movie? And this, going back 10 years now or 9 years or whatever, they have to really kind of like lay it out a little more so to kind of like tease people into it. But yeah, no, it was good. It was a fine trailer.
I do love that. I love seeing these trailers from about 10 years ago now and just seeing how different they are. Like, and the other thing is too, that it's the clout that the MCU has. Like, we kind of joked, they could just throw a title screen out and we'd all be like, yep, I'm buying tickets. I'll be there opening night.
Yeah.
So it's definitely different times.
I feel like trailers have gotten easier to make nowadays, especially in the MCU, because they can just be like, all right, show a close-up of Black Widow's shoulder, but like do it from this angle and make it look real cool. And that's like all they need. But no, back
Who is
then,
she talking to?
Yeah.
Let's tease it. It could be literally nobody that we care about.
And guess what? This scene's not in the movie anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Rashad, give us your take.
I echo the sentiments that Del just spoke of. One line that is in the trailer that I was going to talk about as we got more into the movie portion of the show, but I'll talk about it now. one of the best lines in the early MCU, and when we always keep talking about how how these things help shape the MCU, right? One of the best lines was when Thor says to Jane, I'm paraphrasing, basically, magic for me is science, but for you, it's just magic is science that you don't understand.
Yes.
It basically something, I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically the gist of what he said. And when you think about that, I mean, you could think as deep as you want to about that. If you want to, you can technically apply that to real life in some ways, I guess. But in a way, for the MCU, that is just so true. When we get to the future Thor movies, when you get to the Doctor Stranges of the world and everything like that, where how they just keep expanding upon these little elements. Like again, Iron Man and Hulk are very, compared for a superhero movie, those were kind of grounded, right? As grounded as the kind of those can get. They're not as fantastical as a Thor movie. But this movie introduces cosmic elements and magic for the first time. So just that one line and how it applied to the MCU at that time, but of course where it takes the MCU, that's a line that I had forgot about just over the years of me not watching this movie, but watching it again, I remember that always being a constant thing I would think about.
This is a really good gateway movie to expanding that universe, because certain movies will do that throughout the MCU. Whether it was Guardians of the Galaxy really getting out into the universe, or Thor just introducing the idea, because essentially we're all Jane there, right? Like we're like this is bizarre. In Rashawn, you nailed it with that science quote and magic. Just that is a nice little segue to say, okay, we're kind of shifting a little bit and expanding this very small universe that is the MCU right now. So this is coming, right? And then we get a little bit of a history lesson almost with Captain America in the next movie. Time travel later on the road, some sort of interesting physics throughout the Ant-Man movies. It's fun to see it all kind of tie in together. John, any other thoughts on the trailer at all?
No, yeah, I think we covered it all. It's a much different trailer game nowadays, for sure.
So I want to, I usually kind of introduce some of my thoughts on the movie, just the notes that I keep throughout as I watch. I want to save that and just be a little bit more strict to our itinerary here that we usually follow. So we've talked about kind of our impressions on the film a little bit here. We reacted to the trailer. Let's talk about our favorite non-titular character here, or performance. And I think this movie in particular, of what we've seen in the MCU to date, has so this is the fourth movie of the four movies, kind of the best supporting cast. There's a lot of characters that you could choose from here.
Yeah.
If anyone has a particular character in mind that they want to talk about first,
I'll talk about the obvious choice.
Rashawn, you go first.
So I get to talk about Loki. You guys can talk about it too. But yeah, I think the obvious MVP here was Loki. In terms of this bracket that we have here for the non main character. And the reason why I say that, I have a philosophy with superhero movies that kind of the MCU kind of has proved it wrong, but it's one thing that I do look for in every superhero movie, and is how good is your villain? A lot of superhero movies, especially some of the all-time greats, when you think about again, you think about the Infinity War and Endgame. If you look at the posters behind me, if you think about The Dark Knight, if you think about some of your favorite comic book movies, generally, again, the MCU has proven this wrong sometimes, but generally they have a really great villain. And sometimes I believe when you take in, whether it's comics or your movies, a superhero sometimes is only as good as their best villain. Thus why people like Batman and Spider-Man so much. The best rogues gallery on the two brands, the DC and Marvel side. So when it comes to Thor, I think that it's the obvious answer. I'd be curious if anyone disagrees, but for the early part of the MCU, I think it was a runaway vote that Loki was the best villain in the entire MCU. Just the complexity they introduced with the character, just not being a mustache twirling villain, that he actually does have layers to him. In terms of, he doesn't just necessarily want to be evil. He just wants to prove that he is just as good as Thor after being kind of put to the side his entire life. And then when you look at the realization that, again, he's part frost giant and all that stuff, and seeing what that does to the character. And at the very end, before he takes that plunge, he confesses, like, listen, I just wanted to do this for us. I could have done it. And still not getting that acknowledgement for Odin drives him, no pun intended, to the deep end, to where we see him become the god of mischief. So yeah, his character, it had a lot of layers. I'm sure you guys are going to dive more into it. But Loki and Tom Hiddleston's performance is, I think, and again, that's another thing people agree on. There's nothing to talk about there. His talent is, and this really put him on the map. Like, officially, I know he did some other stuff before, but people really perked their eyes up and wanted Tom Hiddleston in their movie after these Marvel performances that he did with Loki. So yeah, Loki for me is without question the best character that's not Thor in this movie.
If you're just joining us, thank you so much. This is the MCU Re-Viewed. Hope you're listening on your podcast station of choice, as well as watching the video at youtube.com/the Geekiverse. As always, the show presented by Fantastic. Before we get into more of the secondary characters here, I do want to talk about Loki. So I feel like this is almost like the test run for Loki in terms of the MCU. I do not feel that this character comes into his own until we get the Avengers.
Agreed.
It's almost like Tiger was let loose.
Yeah.
And once we got to Avengers, man, he is a big part of why that movie is awesome. But John, let's talk a little bit more about Loki.
Yeah, I was going to kind of almost straight up disagree with Rashawn. I agree with your sentiment that your superhero movie is only as strong as the villain, right? So you really need a compelling villain to tell an excellent superhero story. Obviously, there's some exceptions to that. For whatever reason, Loki didn't land really for me in this movie. And the performance was good. Tom Hiddleston did a great job. I felt that his motivations were a little bit clouded. Even watching it again last night and knowing his motivations, I knew the A to the B to the C. I knew Loki, what he was going for. I just felt like they were a little clouded in the way they portrayed it. I don't know if it was necessarily the cleanest storyline. I just felt like he was kind of always up to something, but they didn't really spell out what he was up to. And I guess you can say, okay, it's part of the mischievous Loki character, but didn't land for me the way I think it should have. I just didn't really care about Thor when Loki was on screen. I really cared more about those relationships he had on Earth, the relationships that he had with his friends, those other warriors that he was working with, the beginning when he was in Jotunheim fighting the Frost Giants, that kind of stuff. Whenever Loki was involved, that was kind of the downer for me. That was the low point of the movie is the Loki storyline, and even the final battle. Like I think that's even with Abomination in mind, I think that this movie has the worst final battle of these four movies we've watched so far. If you want to go back in Loki, I can give you my favorite character, unless you want to go more into some Loki stuff.
More Loki stuff. I don't know that they knew really what this character, despite Avengers coming out, just a year later, I don't know that they knew what it was going to be or could be. And like I said, I feel like that's the best way I can describe it, is this was like the test run. And it was like he was okay. And I think one big thing is there's really not a lot of sympathy for this character. There's a little, but especially knowing what we get later on, whether it's Avengers or, my goodness, Ragnarok. He's wonderful in Ragnarok.
Sure.
Or like the emotional stuff we see in Infinity War. Like, that's a very powerful way to start that movie. And I think back to Avengers Age of Ultron and how we were like, wait, Loki's not going to be around? He's not even going to be in the movie a little bit? Like, I think that was a huge disappointment going into that.
Sure.
John, go ahead.
I think, and what's weird is like the emotion and that kind of empathy should have been there, right? Like they laid the groundwork for why we should have cared about Loki, but just for whatever reason, the hooks didn't land for me. I agree. Yeah, I echo what you're saying. It's just like, I just didn't care. Yeah. That much, at least. I mean, it was fine.
It's okay.
It was okay.
Del, thoughts on Loki in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, he kills it in that scene with Odin when he finds out that he, wasn't actually Odin's son. I mean, Tom Hiddleston in that scene delivers some of the best acting, in the MCU. That scene in and of itself, in my opinion, and the fact that he was with Anthony Hopkins, just the acting chops that are in that scene is just I thought it was great. I didn't have as much of a problem with the whole clouded, motivation thing, but also it's Loki, so he's on the screen, so I'm like, oh, I love this guy, but I can see where that criticism would come from, you know. But he's so great, and you know, one of the things that it takes with Loki is, or one of his features, is that you never know what he's really doing. You don't know what his motivations are, and you know, just to, you know, it's already been mentioned, but at the end when he says to Odin, like, I could have done it for you, Father. I could have done it for all of us, and how that echoes with the next Thor movie where he says, I didn't do it for him. You know, I love what the MCU does with these callbacks, you know, back and forth between the movies. But that's probably getting a little too far ahead of ourselves. But yeah, I mean, Loki's great. I think he's terrific. He's definitely, you know, the best, you know, non-titular character in the movie. Idris Elba, I don't think he was as popular then as he is now. But man, he brings such gravity to the scene. Every scene he's in, I just feel like he's wasted, you know, just because he has, like, he's so, maybe it's just the bass in his voice. I don't know what it is, but for me, every time he was on the screen, he was commanding the attention in that scene. And I feel like he could have been used so much more.
Unfortunately, Del, I think that's a victim of, there's a saying from a YouTuber that I watch, and the thing that he says is the actor is meant to serve the character is not meant to serve the actor. That is a perfect example of that. Even though Idris Elba today is one of the best actors around, you want him in your movie for sure. The role he got casted in, just, you know, you're not gonna do much with Heimdall. You're just not, especially not in the Thor origin story. So I think that's a perfect example of what you're talking about there, and why he feels wasted in a way.
Yeah, I have a note.
Be thankful we had him, right? Let's just be thankful that he was in the movie.
For sure.
Right.
My note about that when I was watching the movie was, it's very cool to see Heimdall when he didn't matter. Like, just to see, you know, like, this movie, we've kind of come to care about Heimdall from at least Thor Ragnarok and obviously the beginning of Infinity War. It's just cool to kind of see his roots and when he got introduced and when he was just like, he had a job to do on Asgard, and he was just kind of that dude. It was, you know, cool. Not a callback, just cool to see him in that light when we know what he becomes.
When Del said that he always was wasted, I was it's not the wasted I thought he meant. So that was my fault. What's interesting?
I mean, he might have been. I wasn't on set, so I don't know.
He's that good. He's that good of an actor. It was unbelievable.
That's how he works, actually.
My last thought, too, just circling back to sympathy towards Loki, and it becomes a theme in the MCU, is that they almost, in a way, create their own villains, for better or worse. Whether it was inadvertently Odin and Thor, you know, pushing Loki to be what he was, or many of Tony Stark's adversaries throughout the years. Kind of, you know, that was something that happened. So in terms of Idris Elba, goodness gracious, yeah, John put it nicely. It's nice to see him when his character doesn't really matter. He's just got his day-to-day job. He's just kind of the guy. Almost, you imagine him like whistling when he works. Like he's just he's in the role he wants to be in. And to see again that they make it an emotional sequence as we get to Ragnarok, and as John mentioned again, the beginning of Infinity War, makes going back and watching this all the better for me.
Yeah.
Secondary characters can't start off, I think, with much better between the Loki and him. But Anthony Hopkins as Odin, talk about presence. He just, legendary actor, of course, been in so many things over the years. He is the perfect guy to be Thor's father, I think. Thoughts on him?
I think Anthony Hopkins is the perfect guy to do whatever they ask him to do. He's just so good. Like there's no miss with Anthony Hopkins.
I remember when that movie came out, seeing that he was in there. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, he's the guy. But just from the trailers, the commercials, or whatever it was I saw,
he's always the guy.
Such a no-brainer. Like, of course they have Anthony Hopkins. Of course.
They could have made a Thor movie with Anthony Hopkins as Thor, and I would have figured out how to. You know, I would have liked it somehow.
Old Thor. Yeah. Worked.
That'll be Thor 5. I love a lot of what he does in the movie, but one thing that always stands out is when he looks at Thor and says, "But you're not king, are ya?" or something to that effect. That's so like biting.
That is
I'm like, man, don't you feel guilty? Like,
that is
your
my
dad is telling you that.
favorite line in the movie. I actually randomly just deleted that clip. I've had that clip on my phone forever, and I just send it to people all the time. I don't know why, but he just goes, "But you're not king yet." It's so
I'm
good.
I'm surprised you never sent that to me.
Oh my! I've definitely sent that in group chats that you've been a part of, so you probably just have it on Do Not Disturb.
John, it's because you're the platinum king. That's why. So it wouldn't apply to you.
Yeah, I love that line so much.
Yeah, that one really stands out because, I think probably we've all been there. Someone you look up to, whether that's your father, your mother, role model, when they tell you, they kind of put you in your place. Like that hurts, right? It's for your benefit, but it's tough because you're growing, but you don't know that right away. So when you see that, and even Hemsworth's reaction is wonderful. Like he captures the gravity of that situation.
Yeah, he's like, "Well, damn."
Well, okay, yeah, you're right, and there's a respect there.
Yeah.
Even despite him kind of acting like a child.
Yeah.
What do we think of Natalie Portman throughout the movie?
That was gonna be mine. I think, man, dude, I think Padme Amidala did a great job as Miss Jane Foster here. I loved it. I don't know. I'm a big Natalie Portman fan, so that's 100% bias coming from me. She's super charming for me. I love her as an actress, and she's been my favorite, like, right hand, maybe like love interest, whatever you call it. My favorite, closest to the main character that we've gotten so far, like even ahead of Gwyneth Paltrow, like hands down, right?
Wow.
Which I think is kind of overrated. I'm not a big Gwyneth Paltrow fan, especially in those films. But yeah, and again, I know it's biased. I know I'm in the minority here, but I really like her performance and her character.
Well, let me ask you this: Why the bias?
I just know everyone else. Well, no, I just like her as an actress, but yes, because of Star Wars. No, but yes.
I'm hit or miss with her for whatever reason. Growing up, like that was my crush, if you will, like my celebrity crush, and it's probably just because I love Star Wars so much. So I don't know. I go back and forth, but I think of the few movies in the MCU that she's been a part of so far, this is the better one. Rashawn, you were disagreeing, I think.
I 100% disagree. I don't care. I don't care. There's a reason why she hasn't been in the MCU since for them all.
It has.
My apologies. Thor: Dark World. But there's reasons why she has not been a part of it. Nobody cares except John.
That is not the
that's
reason.
all I'm gonna
it
say.
is there are very clear documented reasons why she's not part of the MCU anymore, even though she's going to be in the next Thor movie. But whatever.
Despite that, nobody batted an eye except you. But it's okay.
She's back, guys. Yeah, she's Lady Thor. I am intrigued to see that. But
she was in Endgame too. Come on.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I blinked. Sorry. Del, settle this for us, I guess. Natalie Portman, kind of yay, nay.
Well, I mean,
this
she
movie?
doesn't really like. I feel like you could have put like so many actresses in that role. I don't think she brought anything special to the role. I'm not a Natalie Portman hater. I'm also, not a fanboy or anything like that of her. But I was like, all right, she's there. She filled the role. I did think she had good chemistry with Chris Hemsworth. In the scenes they had together, it didn't seem stilted or anything like that. So yeah, she was fine. I don't really have a really deep opinion either way.
Does a character like Darcy piss you guys off, or is it funny too?
I liked her.
Kat Denning as Kat Denning.
Yeah.
Thor.
That's her in all of her work, right? Kat Denning as Kat Denning.
I liked her in this.
Me too.
And I probably more so, believe it or not, in Dark World. Probably one of the bright spots of no pun intended.
You would think she'd be like an annoying character. She
could have been.
Yeah, she easily could have been, but she was.
Yeah, I think they were sparse with what they used. Like they didn't overdo it. She was very much a side character to a side character, so it wasn't. We got just the right amount.
I love how she pronounces Mjolnir.
Mew
Mew?
Always like meow meow.
Mew Mew. Yeah, Mew Mew.
That's really good.
And then Dr. Selvig, I do not recall the gentleman's name who played him off the top of my head. But he's going to thank you, Del. He's going to be in oh my gosh, the Cassian Andor series they just announced, which is kind of exciting. So he also was in Pirates of the Caribbean.
He was in Chernobyl, wasn't he? That HBO series. Anybody else watch that?
I had not seen that.
I think he was the main character in that, and that was absolutely great.
I can
Gotcha.
tell that you guys don't live with a bunch of musical nuts because he was in Mamma Mia and the Mamma Mia sequel, the ABBA musical. So he was a very prominent role in that. So
Sorry, Dal, I can't say that I've partaken.
I live in a hen house, man. It's all. So.
This is your escape for the time being. So next bullet point we want to get to is that moment. If there's one moment that kind of spoke to you, not necessarily even your favorite moment, but what's a memorable moment or two, or memorable bit of dialogue that's quote unquote spoke to you in this movie? Anyone that comes to mind? John,
Yeah.
Do you have one to start us off?
It's two, but they kind of mirror each other. So when he finally gets into the facility and Mjolnir's in shield control, and he finally gets there and he tries to lift that hammer, that was a huge moment for me when he just couldn't. Like, the music was perfect, it was raining, like you really felt his desperation there. Like, I really, really like that. That was one of those first, I think that was the first moment that really grounded the Thor character. Like, I think until then, he was still the cocky kid who, inherited his powers, and he was the strongest, he was king to be, all that kind of stuff. That was the moment that really got me like, oh, this guy's in for a wake-up call here. That was really cool, and then the exact mirroring of that is when he finally gets it back at the beginning of that final fight, when he's just hanging out, somehow dead from a scratch. That was very weird to me, that the dude just flicked him away and he was presumed dead. I know he's just a dude, but whatever. Yeah, when he got it back,
John, let me see you take a hit from an Asgardian mech suit thing.
Dude just flicked him with his fingers, and we assume he's literally dead, not even just injured. We just gave up. Everyone's like, no, it's over. What do you mean? Dude took worse hits throughout this entire battle. Whatever.
Maybe we'll make Bruner do that. I kind of need John here.
Yeah.
So the next funny Geekiverse video, it'll be Bruner.
Oh, I thought you meant for real, for science, to see if it would really matter.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Yeah, cool.
So that moment when he gets Mjolnir back, and he instantly gets back into his Thor garb, and the thunder hits, that was super cool.
Rashawn, any moments stand out to you?
I would say for me, the thing, I guess one of the reasons why I would get hooked on this movie just watching it when I was younger is because it starts off, or one of the first major scenes is Thor and the crew going to what's the planet called? Jotunheim, yes. And just seeing that battle, man, and specifically just seeing Thor just wreck shop, and Loki brought it up later in the movie, is you could have destroyed that entire planet if you really wanted to, or their entire race, specifically, is what he said. And the way Thor was going, if he wouldn't have gotten held back, yeah, he probably could have. I just love seeing that, and that really brought, again, taking it from the corny comic book character that I used to always read, to, yes, this is actually the God of Thunder. Thor is no joke. The other characters didn't even need to be there, and he probably would have been able to hold his own. So that scene was really cool. And then, of course, seeing how it ended, Odin trying to be all diplomatic, but it's dude, your son just butchered how many of their people? There's no way, just stop. So that whole interaction, and just seeing, obviously, again, how that shaped the movie, always is one of my favorite scenes.
Dude, and his Odin in particular, there's so many lines throughout the movie that I just appreciated so much, but him kind of saying, let's treat those as the actions of a child. Yeah, that's my kid, he screwed up, but let's, just the way he interacts with everybody, I thought was awesome. Del, any moments or quotes, anything like that stand out to you?
I need a horse.
Really good.
We only have cats and dogs. Fine, give me one big enough to ride.
So good.
That was probably my favorite, bit of humor in that movie. But in all seriousness, the whole sword in the stone aspect, like John was saying a minute ago, was really I thought that was really good. And then he's so low, and then Loki shows up and just pushes him lower. And I thought it was pretty good. I don't know if I credit Chris Hemsworth or Kenneth Branagh or whomever, but I felt bad for a god. I felt bad for a god of thunder, and he was really probably the lowest point, short of after Asgard is destroyed by Thanos, that we actually see him in all the movies. and I thought that was well acted. It was well done.
I like all of the points you guys made. I think they're all really nice. One thing, there's a few kind of smaller moments that come to mind for me. It's Thor getting used to life on Earth and just being totally out of his element. Like, I always appreciate stuff like that. Even thinking to a movie like Wonder Woman, where Wonder Woman's totally just, she doesn't know like a lot of the common social tropes and traits and just everyday dialogue. I appreciate that when like a superhero is out of their place or out of their element, despite being so powerful and awesome. They don't really know how to just go to a coffee shop and ask for another cup of coffee. Like, he slams the mug down. That's hysterical.
Yeah, I think so much of that worked into his humor here too. Like the line that Del said about the horse, and then when he's like, "Where did you find that thing? 50 miles west. Where are you going? 50 miles west." Like, he's gonna walk.
Just gets up and goes. Yeah.
Really
all
good.
of that's great. I think too, on a more emotional scale, I like when he is actually sitting at the fire with Natalie Portman's character, and he's talking about what Rashawn mentioned earlier with the science and magic, because he seems like he's finally at peace. Like, he's made peace. And sometimes in life, I think, on a more serious note, you have to be comfortable where you are before you move on to that next step, that next promotion, that next chapter, if you will. Not always, but a lot of times I do think that that's true. And you see him there, and it was one of the first times in the MCU we see Thor growing. We see a lot of that throughout the Thor movies and the Avengers. So I think that's kind of a nice, quiet scene, and he's just at peace, and he's kind of explaining the universe, not just to Natalie Portman's character, but to everyone in the audience there, to expand this whole MCU. Stan Lee's appearance. So Stan plays a truck driver who is trying to pull Thor's hammer out of the crater in New Mexico.
Amazing.
That whole sequence is really fun, right?
Great. Yeah, I love it.
You can imagine if something like that happened in real life. We've got in the post-credit scene, Selvig is hired at S.H.I.E.L.D., so this kind of ties into the Avengers a little bit.
Oh yeah, it's like the opening scene, right?
Just about. It's really revealed here that Loki is behind a lot of what's going to be happening there. So I can only imagine seeing that had I seen this before Avengers, to be like, oh my gosh, that's craziness. Like,
Yeah.
And of course Sam Jackson there again.
Very cool.
This is the last movie timeline wise before the Avengers in chronological order. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, that's right. Just kind of random notes that I hit throughout the movie here before we get on to the rankings. A quote from Odin to Thor is that a wise king never seeks out war, but he is always ready for it. Something that's always stood out to me throughout the MCU. I mentioned this earlier, though Thor and the Thor we see in Ragnarok and Endgame, for that matter, are really different characters. At the heart, I think they're kind of the same one, and coming full circle there. They mentioned that Mjolnir was forged in the heart of a dying star. Of course, that foreshadows a little bit of our trip and what we see in Infinity War. Thor getting tasered is a hilarious bit of irony to me, right? Electricity that is going there doesn't take a lot to really get him down.
I didn't think about that.
Me either. That's cool.
Kind of a little bit funny there. We see, we take for granted that this movie establishes the dynamic of Thor's hammer, how it floats, how he throws it, how he uses it. Now, we see different iterations of how he uses it on enemies in different movies, but really, the sound, as you hear kind of that whirl before it comes back, that whole dynamic visually could have been messed up. But really, they did a fine job in establishing that this thing is very heavy, but Thor is unique in the fact that he can wield it, right?
Yep.
Thor out of place on Earth, I already mentioned. Gamma ray references, of course, which points to a number of things in the MCU. They talk that this is the stuff of legends and that it's from children's books, which is funny because all of it becomes a reality in their world. John mentioned how much Hemsworth is just like this perfectly chiseled, ripped human being, right? So I remember reading articles about this movie despite not having seen it. And I remember Hemsworth particularly being like talking about how much steak and eggs he had to actually eat to get that kind of body. But
I believe it.
Allegedly, from everything I've heard, like that was all real. Like there was nothing here that he did not build his body up to be, which is kind of crazy.
Sure, but he won't man up for Endgame. They have to put on a bodysuit for that.
Oh,
yeah, sure,
I
he'll go
can't
quarterback.
wait to talk about that in that episode. I've got some issues with that, but we'll talk about it. We'll talk.
He won't man up. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I could have done that. Loki trying to lift the hammer. Gotta love that. Of course, he's not worthy, but we see that there. Towards the end of the movie, when we see the I don't remember the name of the main the thing that wipes Thor out. That
Destroyer.
swings its
The
hand.
Destroyer,
Yeah,
yeah.
the Destroyer, yeah.
So when they see it, Coulson says, "Is that one of Stark's?"
That was fun.
Nice little tie-in again. And something that I always forget, but picked up again last night, is that Thor talks to Coulson and calls him son of Cole. I think that's really funny.
Oh, that's great. I didn't even notice that. That's really cool.
Says it really quick, but it's so perfect. Son of Cole.
That's cool.
Instead of Odin's son, if you didn't catch the reference. And then this is not at all tied to the MCU, but as a Star Wars and MCU fan, when Sam Jackson's Nick Fury says in the post-credit scene that the Tesseract could be the way to unlimited power.
Yeah.
I think about the last time we see Mace Windu
I never
being
made that
blasted.
connection.
I never thought of that.
And they
Wow.
say unlimited power
Yep.
from the Emperor. So
I literally never made that connection. Wow.
That's yeah.
it's these
I'm
things that
disappointed. I'm
there's
disappointed
always
in
like,
myself.
my hard drive and it's got my day-to-day life on it. It's got a little bit of Star Wars and MCU always running.
Nice.
Always.
Great.
I got a couple little things too. Once you're
Yeah, I'm good.
cool. So I think especially coming right off the heels of Iron Man 2, it's cool to see them set up once again another character that's going to eventually be a main character in MCU in Hawkeye in such a small way. So we got back to back. We've got Black Widow being set up, obviously in a much bigger character in Iron Man 2 than Hawkeye is here. But then you've got Hawkeye here in this movie. Really cool to see. When we have this hindsight of this entire MCU, we understand that like they could not have given these two characters standalone movies and sold tickets. Like Thor has a name. Like we'll get you there. Like that's that we'll make our money back at least because it's Thor. We'll make it a good movie. But at that point, 2011, they are not selling tickets to Hawkeye and to Black Widow. It's just not going to happen. So to see them set those two characters up, albeit very minor in this movie, that was pretty cool to see him make his first appearance. Yeah, and
Always forget that Hawkeye is in this movie.
Yeah.
Like even last night I was like, oh, that's Hawkeye.
Yep.
No matter how many times I see it.
And just speaking to that too, like I think this is when we like really see what Shield is all about. Like we've got the seeds planted from the first two Iron Man films. Like we know that all right, they're looking out for some stuff that the regular government's not really looking out for. But now we kind of see their whole operation here, and that they're really on top of stuff. But they've got some work to do. But just seeing them kind of get fleshed out was a lot of fun. Then I have an Easter egg that I learned yesterday because I knew it was something when I saw the name. Because when they give or what was it? He's got the shirt on, right? And then she says it's my ex-boyfriend's shirt, and the name is Donald Blake. I was like, that has to be something. Del, are you familiar with what this is?
Yeah.
I am. Yeah.
So I had no idea. So I mean, I think Josiah and I might both be clueless here because we're not big comic guys. Rashawn and Del, they would know this, but so Donald Blake in the comics was like in a very, very similar storyline from what I've learned. When Odin casts Thor out for very similar reasons because he wasn't ready, he wipes his memory and throws him onto Earth without any of his powers, and he puts him into the body of a disabled Harvard student named Donald Blake. And he's met with the same tasks of trying to get his hammer back and X, Y, and Z, but he literally is Donald Blake. So it's an alter ego for Thor in the comics.
I did not know that at all. It's funny, John. I remember like they're so obvious with it. I feel like
Exactly.
Donald Blake, and I almost wrote a note, but I had no idea what it meant, so I just skipped it. So I'm happy that you did the research.
I knew I had to, and I knew that I figured somebody in the room was going to be familiar with it because it was pretty on the nose, but I had to know. So now whoever else didn't know, now you know.
Yeah,
That's
fun
right.
fact
See?
about Donald Blake is that originally, I think, when the Thor character was first created, it was almost like an alternate, like a secret identity kind of thing. Like the Dr. Donald Blake found the hammer, and then he became Thor. And then I think like years later, they retconned it. So actually, no, he was always Thor. He just didn't know it.
Got it.
Well, that's a little bit of nerd trivia.
Sure, I'm sure the version I read was the retcon version, like because it was like on a MCU or a Marvel official page. So they were trying to give me the story they wanted me to see.
For sure. Then, yeah, for sure.
Any other Easter eggs or fun facts or notes?
That's what I got. That's it.
All right. So Is it that time? Are we ready to rank this thing?
I can't
Yes.
wait to rank these. Let's do
All
it.
right.
So I'm gonna pull up the ranking image for the folks at home. You guys don't have the the privilege of seeing them on your end, but it's pretty simple. Right now we're sitting at Iron Man number 1, as we all obviously agree. Iron Man 2 at number 2, and the Incredible Hulk at number 3.
Just for argument's sake,
Yeah.
Del, where would you rank Iron Man 1 and 2? Which one would you have higher?
I'm sorry, bud. I listened to the last episode. I'm with the other guy.
That did not go as I had planned.
How did you not expect that? All right.
You guys gave Whiplash so much love. I think he was such a boring villain in that movie. I'm sorry. Like, you guys are like, oh, he's cool. Like, no, he's boring.
I liked him.
Yeah,
I liked him
They
enough.
gave Whiplash credit. I didn't say anything.
I had fun.
them.
I still ranked it too, though. I still made the right call.
It's a good movie. I love it. Don't get me wrong. But
This is why I'm not using a snap on that one.
Yeah.
Because I know that I'm not going to get the public's backing on it,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is fine. Everybody can be wrong from time to time.
Yeah, oh boy. Take it where you can get it. All right, so who here thinks that Thor should rank above the Incredible Hulk?
I do.
Me.
All of us, all 4. So let's slide down the Incredible Hulk. Who thinks it should rank above Iron Man 2?
I do as well.
Rashawn does. Rashawn, I think you're alone, my friend. I think you're
this
alone.
is-
How do you feel?
you know, I'm gonna come around.
Ooh.
Yeah. All right. It's a .0 something whatever. But yeah, I'm gonna rank it above.
We've never had a tiebreaker before, so what do we do?
Majority has to rule, my friend. It stays at number 3. That's how it works. So at least you got some moral support from Dell, but it stays at 3.
I think that's another one I wouldn't use a snap on because it is close.
It's gonna stay down there regardless. I think once we
that's not blasphemous. That's not like ridiculous. That's not going to make me fall out of my chair. There's a couple that I think might,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but
I
that
don't
one I
know.
might.
It's funny because
Yeah.
like we're just 4 weeks in here, but and there's only been really, it's not even that much contention because like you guys say an Iron Man is better than Iron Man 2. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Okay, whatever. But like, and same I think to a degree with Rashawn. Like if you guys were to be like, no, Thor is definitely better than Iron Man 2, I'd be like, I might be able to get there.
See,
But like I can't wait to find where we find like this.
There's
this
gonna be
divide-
someone that have like 5 movie gaps, and I already know one. I'm not gonna say it, but I
Well,
know one, and I'm gonna have to do some.
I know just from knowing John kind of where some of his would sit. And I
Yeah.
know like we've got similar tastes with this ranking, but there are maybe a few drastic ones that are that will be the most fun debate for all of it.
I'll be honest with you. If you would have gone, if I would have gotten outvoted here, I probably would have used a snap. Like I feel pretty strongly that Thor is not a better movie than Iron Man 2. Like I probably would have gone to the poll and would have fought for that one because I think the Iron Man movies, I just like Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark is almost all I need for them to not be bottom tier movies. Like I watched Thor. I didn't see Robert Downey Jr. and I didn't see anybody even close. I didn't see anybody close. They're like all 3 of the Iron Man movies. Like fault them for what you will. I think that they stand pretty far above some of the bottom tier Marvel movies. So I would have fought for that one if I would have lost.
So I am very, very excited once we get to Iron Man 3 week because that is like Dell and I talked on Sales podcast about like where Last Jedi, for example, would stand, or even Empire Strikes Back towards the top of the list. And like there are certain MCU blasphemies, and I know people feel strongly
Very
about
much
where
so.
they think Iron Man 3 should be.
I think Iron Man 2 and 3 people have some very strong opinions on. I think Rashawn's already showed his hand a little bit, but Rashawn, I'm hoping you watch Iron Man 3 in a new light. I hope you sit down and watch it and just put all your past bias aside like I did with Thor. And
I hope that I agree. I hope I do too.
When was the last time you've seen it?
He's saying don't count on it.
Question. It at the minimum has been. I know it's been more than 2 years. It's been about 3.5 years. It's been some time. So I'm hoping.
Okay.
I'm not. I don't want to go into it. And
Yeah, we're not going into anything. We're not
wait.
going to anything, but I just hope you give it the time of day. So just to recap while I have it up here, our current rankings are Iron Man, number 1. Iron Man 2, number 2. Thor, number 3. The Incredible Hulk, number 4. So that's the official MCU Re-Viewed ranking for week 4.
All right. All right,
It's
I
fun.
like
I'm
it.
excited
Well,
to see how this goes on because you and I think we have very similar thoughts so far in terms of like rankings and everything. And just hearing what you said about Iron Man 3 in the last episode, I'm really excited for it to. You guys
So
could do a whole separate episode of each one of these where it's just the debate of where the movies
The
stand
ranking.
in contrast to the other movies.
yeah,
it's gonna get that way.
exactly. I think eventually we're gonna have to slim down some of our thoughts on the movies just to fit in like a half hour for these rankings because we're gonna get in there.
You will see them proportionally grow in terms of this last segment here
No
as
doubt.
we move on. Probably towards, I would say, once we're about a third of the way in.
Yeah.
It'll get very, very interesting very quick.
That's my favorite part though. Is I love the ranking stuff. I love those conversations.
Yeah, it's a blast, and honestly, you can't go wrong. It's the MCU, guys. It's awesome.
For sure.
But we do want to hear your rankings from home, the Geekiverse community. Go to facebook.com/the Geekiverse or visit us on Twitter. Get into it with us. We want to hear what your list looks like after 4 weeks so far. John, time to talk about a giveaway.
Yeah, so Dell's here, which is always fun. So our official partner of this show is Fantastic, which is an awesome line of shirts from the folks over at 26 Shirts. They have partnered with us to give away one shirt from that Fantastic line per episode. So we are on week 4 here, so we'll be giving away our 4th shirt. We're flipping around different social media platforms, trying to get different options out there for different ways to enter. We're looping back to Twitter. So when this episode posts, which will be Monday, I never know the date, and I'm never ready for this part. Monday the 25th, Memorial Day. This episode will post. Alongside that, you will see a very clear tweet that says, "Hey, giveaway alert! This is the tweet. Retweet this." Follow us on the Geekiverse and follow the folks over at 26 Shirts/Fantastic, and you'll be entered to win. So every week, new shirt. Big thanks to Dell and all those folks over at 26 Shirts.
So we'll wrap up this episode of the MCU Reviewed. We'll leave off with some social media information so everyone can get in the conversation. And just a quick plug for anything you may have going on at the Geekiverse, because we've got a lot going on during anniversary month here. But let's start with our special guest, who's become more than a special guest on the show. He's at least an every other week kind of guy right now. Mr. Del Reid, tell us a little bit about what Fantastic is, how you help people, and where people can find the wonderful merch.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, I'll go real fast. So 26shirts.com, we sell a different, typically Buffalo themed t-shirt every 2 weeks. We also have a Chicago line. But as anybody who follows me on Twitter knows, I love, the movie franchises and geekdom just as much as I love sports. So I had to find a way to express that. And so the natural progression was to do a line of shirts that were just based on geeky type things. So we have some Star Wars themed stuff, some Marvel themed stuff, some other, different fandoms and everything. And normally it's all limited edition stuff, but now and then we have some overstock that we sell on the website as well. And what makes us different from every other t-shirt company is that for every shirt we sell, we donate a portion of the proceeds back to either a person in need in the community or a charitable cause that is helping people in the community. So that's our mission. We want to take the things that people love and find ways to honor those things that people enjoy and do it in such a way that gives back to helping somebody else who could use the help. So that's kind of our thing. We've been around almost 7 years now, and to date we've raised over $750,000 that we've managed to donate back. So people seem to like what we do, apparently. I'm super honored, and I love that. And it gives me a lot of cool opportunities to help people in need, and then also hook up with people like yourselves and talk about fun movies and stuff like that.
It's always exciting to see that number climb in terms of the dollar amount there. I got to know Del in I believe 2017. Now we kind of hit it off talking about Star Wars that led to a fun relationship, and here we are podcasting together. It's pretty awesome. But let's get these guys to $1 million here. It's going right into the community. It's helping people in need. You won't find a better collection of human beings that are doing this and making a real difference in the world. So we appreciate you, Del.
Thanks.
John, what's going on for you? You're all over the place.
Yeah, I'm all over the place. Mostly on twitter.com @Disruptoid, just giving you awful takes about baseball and all sorts of nerdy things. Over for the Geekiverse, we're doing some really fun stuff. This has been my bread and butter, though. I'm having so much fun with this show. So any love and support you can give this show, I really appreciate that. We're having so much fun talking about these movies. So if you're bored at home and you really want to do something, rewatch these movies with us, and hop in the comments and give us your thoughts. That's been a lot of fun. Of course, we're doing Geeks Got Game, our video game podcast. That's bi-weekly. We're doing our Disney Plus podcast. That's monthly. That's called Pluscast. We're recording that right after this. We're going to be talking about the final season of the Clone Wars. So that's going to be fun. But yeah, other than that, Twitter, baseball, that's about it.
So everybody at home has John to thank for making this show a reality. We had talked about it for a long time, but just a few weeks back, about a month now, John said, so when are we getting serious about doing the MCU review? He produces it, he organizes it, and doesn't exist without him. Rashawn, you are all over the place as well. You've been a part of the Geekiverse for a little under 2 months now, but you are a star in just about all of our shows. So where can people find you online, and any other plugs?
Yes, sir. You can catch me here weekly on the MCU Re-Viewed. You can catch me bi-weekly on our gaming podcast, Geeks Got Game. You can catch me monthly on the Disney Plus podcast as well. Just like John, I talk all types of different things on Twitter. True King Zero. You can follow me there. Basketball, gaming, movie stuff like this, Marvel stuff, any other movie news and topics and stuff like that. I'll chime in on. Also, if you are into gaming, catch me on Twitch, True King Zero. Catch me streaming a variety of games, whatever I feel like doing at that particular time. But yeah, I'm, like you said, I'm everywhere.
I am at Josiah D. Leroy on social media. You can find me really talking about a lot of video games, MCU, and Star Wars coverage. The Geekiverse is celebrating its 6th anniversary all month long. So we've got just a few weeks to go here. By the time you are watching this episode, we will have unveiled our 6th anniversary limited edition t-shirt. Go get it while it's hot off the press. Once they're gone forever. That is going to be at thegeekiverse.storeenvy.com. You can get this shirt here, which says I love you 3000 for the podcast listeners at home. We've got over 20 designs in there currently. And we'll be introducing a Marvel theme shirt that I believe anyone who listens to this show will greatly appreciate. Let's see. Next week, boys, what do we got? Captain America?
Yeah, the first Avenger.
Cap.
All right.
Yes.
Going back to the 1940s, my friends.
We got Cap next week, and we've got the Avengers the week after. It's never too late to jump in. Go back, listen, and watch all these episodes that we've got on MCU Reviewed. For Del, for John, and for Rashawn, I'm Josiah. We appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you next week.